Today I'm going to talk about the Grail Land, what I call the Grail Land or Grail Kingdom, and it's the second in this year's series of the Affectionate Alliance, as I've called it. The Affectionate Alliance really is love shared between us, but also love shared with the land, because the land loves us and supports us. So we need to build up these affectionate alliances more and more. Anyway, today we will look at the Grail Land, which is a landscape temple stretching from the south of France to the north of Scotland, and how it has been worked or acted upon both now and in the past, including the pilgrimages organised by the Francis Bacon Research Trust over the past 30 years and performed as mysteries. God, time goes on quickly, doesn't it? But we've been working very hard with this. Well, Europe as a whole derives its name from the Europa and Bull myth, and the Holy Grail legends are an intimate part of this. And the child of Europa and the Bull is called Mercury, which is a name meaning true word or word of truth. So that's why it's exciting that I'm telling you this on May Day, Beltane. Well, the symbolism is synonymous with the Egyptian mysteries, wherein the symbolic incarnatory form of Osiris is a bull, and that of Isis is a cow. Their child Horus is a bull calf. Well, the Europa and Bull myth is a simplified version of the Dionysian mystery, wherein Europa is known as Persephone, and her child Mercury is known as Zagreus, who becomes Dionysus. But the bull is still the symbolic incarnate form of Zeus. And Zagreus, the child, is described as a bull calf when he is first born. And while still a child, he is attacked and torn to pieces by the Titans. However, Pallas Athena, with some help from Zeus, manages to rescue Zagreus' heart and raises it up in a new form, a form which is that of a swan, and with a new name, Dionysus. And Dionysus simply means son of God. So by this means, the mortal Zagreus becomes the immortal Dionysus. And Pallas Athena, who rescues the heart, Pallas Athena is the goddess aspect of Persephone, whilst Zeus is the god aspect of the bull. Now I'm going to share my screen now and look at it in terms of landscape temples. Now hopefully you can see that all right. Now in the landscape of Europe, Europa is represented by the British Isles. They're the British Isles. And the bull by mainland Europe. The British Isles are feminine in respect of mainland Europe and are known as the Blessed Isles or the Goddess Isles. Although the goddess, of course, has many names. One of the key ones, though, that gives the game away is Britannia, for Britannia is equivalent to Pallas Athena of the Greeks. In a good version of the Europa and Bull myth, the bull is said to rise out of the Black Ocean or Black Sea, carrying Europa on his broad neck and shoulders, and flies with her to a secret place where they make love. This can be seen in the landscape. The bull rises out of the Black Sea and flies over the Mediterranean Sea, head down, heading westwards towards the Atlantic. And the Iberian Peninsula is the head of the bull. And the bull's broad neck and shoulders is represented by France, and the British Isles rides on this broad neck and shoulders of the bull. Now in the sky, the bull is represented by the constellation Taurus, whilst Europa or Persephone is the star cluster called the Pleiades. That's Taurus here, and there's the Pleiades. The Pleiades are known as the seven sisters or doves, that symbolises doves, virgin daughters of Phoenix, king of Phoenicia, and his wife Peone. They're also represented collectively in myth by a single star and symbolised as a single dove that sits on the neck of the bull. And the single Pleiadian star, imagine that's one star, and here's the picture of Taurus drawn in. So there's Pleiades, the dove or single star on the neck of Taurus. Well, this star, this Pleiadian star, is said to have been the brightest and most beautiful in the heavens until it was broken up into 7 stars. And her name was Maya, meaning mother, from which is derived the name Mary. And Mary is known as the daughter of Anna in tradition, being Anna's beloved or chosen one. And this is the meaning of the name Brit Anna or Britannia, which means chosen of Anna. In other words, Mary. And all this is encapsulated in the Atlantean myth, wherein after the Great Flood, Atlas rescues his daughters, the Hesperides, and raises them above the flood waters upon his broad neck and shoulders. And Atlas was known as the Phoenix, or the Phoenix King. And the Hesperides are the Pleiades, and also called the Blessed Isles of the West. And these are the British Isles. The British Isles are the Isles of the Hesperides. And it is in the orchards of the Hesperides that Merlin can be found eating the golden apples. Yummy. Well, the result of the lovemaking of the bull in Europa is the birth of the child Mercury. That's the name of the child in that myth. But in the Dionysian mystery, this child is called Zagreus. Now, for reasons which I shall now endeavour to explain, the landscape temple that we call the Grail Land represents this child. And this is the Grail Land from the north of Scotland down to the south of France. There's the child of Europa and the bull. Now in November or December 1972, whilst in Edinburgh and out walking, I was told inwardly to follow my nose. And the nose in the centre of the face symbolises the heart in the centre of the body. So this I then did and found myself in an altered state of consciousness. And when I reached a certain place in the landscape, my soul was suddenly lifted higher up out of my body until I was looking down on the land as if I was a high-flying bird or satellite. And I saw below me what I later called the Grail Kingdom or Grail Land, stretching from the south of France to the north of Scotland. Moreover, I saw it with its 7 chakras, which appeared as distinct areas of the landscape, rather like a ladder, and Jacob's ladder is what came to mind. I then heard a voice reminding me that this was one of the key reasons why I had incarnated, so that I with others would explore, work with, and help this landscape temple come to as full a manifestation as possible. I was then lifted even higher into a great temple on high, where I was in a circle of souls standing around a sacred flame. We were then asked to remember our oaths that we had taken before incarnation, oaths associated with the purpose of our incarnations, and we were asked if we were still willing to do this. Well, we all said yes, and then touched the tips of our swords, which we seemed to have, above the sacred flame. And as the sword tips touched, a 6-pointed star appeared, shining bright, very bright. We then each turned outwards and were told that we would in due time meet all those others who would be helping in our work. And I was then returned back to my body on earth. So naturally, in the weeks that followed, I sought confirmation of the vision, and I soon received this confirmation in no uncertain terms. So that was that sort of thing. Well, at the end of March 1973, Sarah and I married. And a few months later, in the summer, we went on a retreat together at the White Eagle Lodge headquarters at Newlands in Hampshire. And there we met a wonderful elderly woman called Hope, who just happened to be the secretary of the Francis Bacon Society. We hadn't met her before, at least not in this life. But she, however, recognized us immediately as souls she knew, and spent her time during the retreat telling us all she knew about Francis Bacon. Now, at that time, Sarah and I had no idea why she was sharing all this knowledge with us, but nevertheless it seemed right and rang bells in my heart. And some weeks later, I'm not sure whether it's 3 or 6 weeks later, when back in Edinburgh, I was given a very powerful dream in which I met the spiritual being I call the Master. And he made a special gesture which had a deep meaning that I didn't then understand, and gave me a message to give to Hope, which also I did not understand. He then woke me up immediately so that I would remember the message and write it down in a letter to Hope, which I did. And then I posted it. And I received a reply from Hope by return of post, in which she began her letter, "I have waited 20 years for this. Now we can begin our work together." And this we did. And this is how the Baconian work in which I'm involved in began. What I didn't know then, but discovered years later, was that the gesture the Master had made in the dream was a Kabbalistic gesture expressing the Hebrew letters Aleph, Beth, which means, now we begin. And this is also how the first sentence of Genesis, the first book of the Hebrew Torah and Holy Bible, begins. Now the Aleph refers to the invisible source in the heart, the eternal now. So at the start of the Torah, it is not written. Instead, Genesis begins with the letter Beth. That's our letter B, which refers to the Word, the creative sound or energy of the universe, vibrating with wisdom. And the first 3 words of Genesis are Bereshit, Bara, Elohim. Bereshit, Bereshit, Bara, Elohim. And the first Hebrew word is Bereshit, meaning beginning or in the beginning. But in its fullness, however, Bereshit means in the beginning of the beginning that is always beginning. In other words, the beginning without end. So bara means created, but also creating, as creation is a continuous process. Now Elohim or Elohim, so that's this word here, is translated as God, but it is a plural word and refers to El and Ella, or Al and Allah, the divine father and mother, united as one. In other words, we. Now, in the years following this, I sought to get to know the landscape, both by visiting all 7 of the areas, from the north of Scotland to the south of France, and also by researching their history, religion, philosophy, mythology, legends, architecture, culture, music, and so on. Everything possible, really. And results of all this not only further confirmed the initial vision, but also added all the extra details required for putting the work we were called to do into action. And this we did in the 1990s with the FBRT organised Grail pilgrimages, visiting 1 chakra per year in a figure of 8 sequence, moving as the process of life moves within the human body, from heart to head to abdomen and back to heart. Well, now I'll say something about the Grail story which is very associated with Joseph of Arimathea. Joseph of Arimathea was the younger brother of the father of the Virgin Mary, mother of Jesus, i.e. Joseph was a great uncle of Jesus. And when Joseph of Nazareth, Mary's husband, died, Joseph of Arimathea became the guardian of Mary's family and acted as father to Jesus and to Jesus' brothers and sisters. But when Jesus came of age, he took over the guardianship as the eldest son of Mary's family. After the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, Joseph was accused of stealing Jesus' body from the tomb and was imprisoned. And in prison he was deprived of food. But whilst in prison, Christ appeared to Joseph in a glory of light and entrusted the Holy Grail into his care, instructing Joseph in the mystery of the Mass. And from then on, Joseph was miraculously kept alive by a dove that entered his cell every day and deposited a wafer of bread in the cup until eventually he was released from prison. That's how the story goes. In AD 36, during further persecutions of the Christians, Joseph of Arimathea was cast away from Palestine with others in a boat without sail or oars. The other exiles accompanying Joseph of Arimathea included his son Joseph's and daughter Anna, also known as Engeus, plus many others, including Lazarus, Lazarus' sister Martha, and the three Marys, Mary Magdalene, wife of Jesus, Mary Salome, wife of Zebedee and mother of the apostles James and John, and Mary Jacobi, wife of Cleopas and cousin of the Virgin Mary. They all miraculously survived and eventually sailed onto the south coast of Gaul, nowadays France, landing near Marseille, about that area. Now the apostle Philip, who was already there, received them and consecrated Joseph as apostle of Britain. So whilst St. Philip and the three Marys set up their respective homes in the south of France, or south of Gaul, in the root chakra of the Grail Land, St. Joseph journeyed northwards to Britain with 11 companions. They travelled up through the lower chakras of the Grail Land to the north coast of France, where they set sail for Britain. So they moved up there and across to Britain. In Britain they were met by the Arviragus. Arviragus means High King, who was Caradoc, together with his brother Guiderius. And they were both sons of a famous king called King Cunobelinus, in other words, Cymbeline. And Caradoc, who was an old friend of Joseph, presented Joseph with 12 hides of land. Now 12 hides is about 1,920 acres, or 777 hectares, for anyone who likes sacred numbers, and a promise of protection against Roman molestation. Now, thanks to the careful research and discoveries made by Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett, the results of which were written up by Adrian Gilbert in his book, The Holy Kingdom, we know that the 12 hides of land were on Hart's Hill, near High Cross, the heart centre of Roman Britain and centre of the Celtic landscape zodiac of Britain, where the two great Celtic roads, Watling Street and Fosse Way, cross. And Hart's Hill had a strongly fortified Celtic Iron Age fort on its summit. It was one of the so-called castles of the Most Holy Head of Bran, where Bran's head was held overnight on its way down Watling Street from Snowdonia to London. And the Hart's Hill fort was the one closest to High Cross, therefore it had the role of guarding the heart centre of Britain. Now this is all important in terms of this Holy Grail. The settlement that was set up next to it by Joseph and his companions gradually expanded over the centuries and became known as Oldbury. So there's High Cross in the centre of Britain I'm pointing to now. This is Bran's route, which is Watling Street, coming from Snowdonia down to London. And there's Oldbury, which is Hart Hill. Just slightly west, slightly north of High Cross. Now in the Grail legends it says the first table of the Holy Grail was established there, which was on Hart's Hill in Joseph's settlement. And the first table of the Holy Grail represented the table of the Last Supper that Jesus had with his apostles. A fish, but for this first table of the Holy Grail, a fish was laid in Christ's place, because Christ was known as the great fisher, or the fisher avatar. And a cup, symbol of the Holy Grail, was set in the centre of the table. The 12 companions, including St. Joseph, sat around the table. Over the years, Joseph, together with his daughter and her husband Bron, made several journeys down the spine of the Grail Land to visit the Apostle Philip and the others there, to keep their friendship fresh, to share news, and to receive further instruction. All this is quite important to note. Now, Anna, Joseph's daughter, was married to Bron, whose name was an alternative rendition of the god name Bran. In other words, Bron is the same as Bran. And Bron became the next guardian of the Holy Grail when St. Joseph had become aged and passed on the role to his son-in-law. Bron and Anna lived at Caerbran in Llangollen, Wales. Dinas Bran, pointing to it now. Now Bron became known as the first Grail King. First Grail King, and Caerbran as the Grail Castle. And Caerbran forms the focus of the outer major chakra, which is the Pleiades, on the spine of the boar of Britain. The outline of the boar is suggested by the coastline of Britain, wherein Wales is the head of the boar. The spine of the boar is marked by Watling Street, known as the way of the most holy head of the god Bran. So it was down this route that the head of the god Bran was brought from Snowdonia to London, where it was buried under the White Mount. So it's brought down all the way from Snowdonia, down Watling Street to London. Later in Norman times, the White Tower, or Tower of London, was built on top of the mount. So nowadays you can't see the mount at all. It's disappeared underneath everything else. Well, the head of Bran is a type of Holy Grail, a Celtic precursor to the Christian version. And the boar was the sacred animal of the Druids, as also of the Eleusinian Mysteries. And the Eleusinian Mysteries were an offshoot of the Dionysian Mysteries, and used the boar as a symbol of the natural mortal soul rather than a bull. And the boar became also the sacred emblem of King Arthur, who in his turn became the guardian of the Holy Grail and Grail King. Now, the Holy Grail is symbolized, well, it's called a vessel of light. So it's usually symbolized like a cup with a wafer in it, a wafer of light. But the word grail means vessel. And what it's really referring to, esoterically, is the mind or soul, our soul, which is a mind. It's therefore associated with our head. So the Holy Grail is a mind filled with pure and holy thoughts of wisdom. If it wasn't filled with holy thoughts of wisdom, it'd just be a grail. But to be holy has to be filled with very good thoughts, loving thoughts, which are wise. It's also called in tradition, Celtic tradition, a vessel of poetic inspiration and knowledge of truth, and it shines with light. The symbols used in myth and legend include Bran's head, Ceridwen's cauldron, and the Holy Grail. Now, the Holy Grail is also symbolized or represented as the mother of the Christ child. And the Christ child, in actual fact, is knowledge of truth. And that's the celestial soul transmuted from the natural soul, who is the mother. So each of our natural souls, our persons, are mothers. Whether you're in a male or female body, you're a mother of your knowledge of truth, which is illumination. And as soon as you've got that illumination, you've transmuted something of yourself, something of your natural self, into a celestial soul. You've transmuted something from your mortality into immortality. And that just shines everywhere. And this transmutation is described as a birth, which is a becoming. In initiatory terms, it's called resurrection. And Christ means the same as Mercury, the Egyptian Mar Keru, which means true word. So we give birth to our Mercury child, which is a Christ child. And another meaning behind the word Christ from the Egyptian Mar Keru is Rosicrucian, because the Rosicrucian symbol comes from the Chi Rho, which is how Keru is written in Egyptian and Greek. Now, in larger terms, the British zodiac itself, you know, the landscape temple we call the British zodiac, it's known as the round table in terms of landscape. And the Holy Grail is at the centre of the land. In other words, High Cross, the Harts Hill area. So this is a table, a round table, with the Holy Grail at the centre. So you can see why Joseph would be settled there, right at the centre of the land. And the land holds the wisdom. As Francis Bacon says, wisdom is in the land. It's in the land. It's in nature. We just have to learn to bring it out and learn about it. And so land holds the wisdom. It's a vessel, in other words, of wisdom. It's a grail. And the knights of the Round Table have to go in search of this Holy Grail. That's why they go out into the land. And in doing so, they discover and bring the wisdom to birth by doing great works of service. So there's lots of stories about all the difficulties and works of service that the Knights of the Round Table go through. Now, on an even bigger scale, the British Isles is a Holy Grail. The British Isles represent Europa or Persephone, the mother of Mercury or Zagreus. And Mercury Zagreus is the Grail Land. I hope you're still with me on this. So there you've got the mother, there's you've got the father, and there's the child, the Grail Land. So now I want to take you through the Grail Land chakras, take you through the Grail Land chakras one by one, starting with the root chakra down here. So there's a map of it again. So the root chakra of the Grail Temple, or Grail Land, is located in the Gulf de Leon and its surrounding coastal landscape. But its main dry land focus is at Les Saintes-Maries de la Mer on the southernmost tip of the Camargue at the outlet of the River Rhône. There's the River Rhône. Les Saintes-Maries de la Mer is the major gathering point for the Romany gypsies who meet here twice a year for their major festivals. They've been doing this for centuries and they're still doing it. And their patron saint is the Black Virgin, known to them as Saint Sarah. also venerated are the three Marys who landed here: Mary Jacobi, Mary Salome, and Mary Magdalene. And at the time of the disciples' arrival on this coast, what later became Les Saintes Maries de la Mer was an Egyptian port and town, with a Roman fort bearing the Egyptian god named Ra, which means light. And Sarah, whom tradition relates as being a black Egyptian, became the friend and handmaiden of Mary Jacobi and Mary Salome. And the three of them settled at Ra, where they established a Gallo-Roman sanctuary and Christian oratory. And when they died, they were buried there, with the two Marys laid side by side and Sarah nearby. And the altar, a little later, the high altar of a 9th century church was eventually built over the graves of the saintly women, and this in turn was replaced by a 12th century Romanesque church, which is the church still now existing. And in 1448, King René, Count of Provence, carried out excavations to discover the tombs of the three saints, a task in which he was successful. He then built a special crypt immediately above the tombs, a crypt which is open to the nave of the church. That's why it's so special. And this entailed raising the floor of the chancel with many steps up to it from the nave, and with the high altar sited high above the crypt and tombs. The statue of St. Sarah is kept in this open crypt. And the church and the village around it was originally dedicated to Notre Dame de la Mer, Our Lady of the Sea, until the 19th century, when it was renamed Les Saintes Maries de la Mer in honour of the three Marys. Whilst Mary Jacobi, Mary Salome and Sarah stayed in Ra, the other disciples dispersed to different places in the root chakra of the Grail Land. So Martha, the sister of Lazarus, went a few miles north to Tarascon. Lazarus went eastwards to Marseille. There we are, Marseille, where he became the bishop. Maximus went to Aix. Mary Magdalene went to the mountain of Saint Baume, east of Marseille, where she lived as a hermit for 30 years in a cave high up on a north-facing cliff. But when she died, her body was buried at St. Maximum, where later a basilica was built. Now, the importance to the gypsies of Sarah, their patron saint, at Les Saintes Maries de la Mer, is one of the keys to the recognition and knowledge of the Grail Land. The gypsies, who came originally from northwest India, where they were one of the nomadic tribes living in that region, migrated westwards around the turn of the first millennium AD, arriving in Europe during the 12th and 13th centuries. And speaking Romani, a language based on Sanskrit, they easily recognized Sarah as the personification of Sarai or Sri, otherwise known as Sarasvati, the consort or Shakti of Brahma. And Sarasvati's special abode is the Muladhara or root chakra. In Hindu tradition, she is also known as the goddess Kundalini, who lies coiled like a serpent in the root chakra as if asleep, waiting to be stimulated into action by the love of Brahma. When stimulated, which is done by love, she rises up the spine as a vivifying and enlightening energy, causing the chakras to blossom and shine, and bringing ever-increasing consciousness, illumination, and joy. From this, it is clear to see that the knowledge of the Grail Land was known to the apostles and disciples of Jesus, especially to the three Marys and Sarah who settled in the root chakra of the Grail Land for the purpose of representing and tending the fire of the goddess Kundalini, and also to St. Philip, the apostle who initiated Joseph of Arimathea, and of course to Joseph of Arimathea, who was sent northwards up the spine of the Grail Land to prepare the route of the Kundalini up the spine of the Grail Land and into its heart area associated with Britain. Now the sacral chakra is focused by the Puy de Dôme, the oldest, highest and most prominent volcanic mountain or puy in the northern part of the Auvergne Mountains, the Massif Central. The mountain itself rises 1,465 meters above sea level, which for English people it's 4,806 feet above sea level. It's high. Now Puy de Dôme has been a holy mountain for thousands of years and was sacred to the Celts of Gaul long before the Romans built their great temple of Mercury on its summit in the 1st century AD. There's Puy de Dôme. The Roman temple was built on the site of a Gallic sanctuary to the god Lu, which is one of the most important sanctuaries in Gaul. As I said before, Lu means light and is the Celtic name of Arthur. And the Roman temple was the home of a fabulous statue of Mercury, which, according to Pliny the Elder, was made by the Greek sculptor Zenodor around about AD 60 and stood some 18 meters high. Just imagine that. Now, a few kilometers directly to the east of Puy de Dôme is an ancient sacred hill called Clermont. That translated in English, that means shining mount, upon which is built the city of Clermont-Ferrand, with its majestic cathedral of Notre Dame, Our Lady, in its centre. Used by the Druids and then by the Romans as the metropolis of the Auvergne, and at one time even being given equal status in rank to Rome, in Christian times Clermont-Ferrand became the place where the doctrine of the Virgin Mother, the Blessed Virgin Mary, was first made. It was also the first place in Christendom to have a statue of the enthroned Mother and Child, and was the starting point of the major pilgrimages of the Madonna cult, which spread out into the Auvergne. And the hills and valleys of the Massif Central are filled with shrines, churches and sacred places dedicated to the Virgin Mother principle. And Sarah and I have explored these. They're rather lovely, beautiful. And that's how the Virgin Mother and her child were usually portrayed in the early times, just like Isis with the child Horus on her lap. But Isis, or Mary herself, sits enthroned on a throne. And the child, Jesus, is usually shown holding the book of law, the book of the wisdom. Now the solar plexus chakra of the Grail Land as a sacred centre is marked by Chartres, although the metropolis of Paris and the Palace of Versailles, which lie east of Chartres, are also involved. The city of Chartres is built on a hill that rises above the northern plains of France, and it lies in the ancient land of Bellissima, shortened to Beauce or Beauce. And this is known as the land of the saints. It has been a principal Virgin Mother sanctuary from the earliest times. Bellissima means the most beautiful lady. And the name of Chartres is derived from Carnutes, the ancient sacred centre of the Carnutes, the guardians of the stone. That's what the name means. In Druidic times, a sacred standing stone representing the golden child of Bellissima was erected in an oak grove on the summit of the hill. And besides the oak grove and standing stone, there was also a sacred grotto with a spring. So that whereas the stone signified Bellissima's child, the grotto and spring represented Bellissima herself, or at least her womb. And the grotto had several chambers or interconnecting grottos, referred to as holy, strong places. So the whole sanctuary was called the Place of the Strong. And it was the main Druidic sanctuary of Gaul. It was the main Druidic sanctuary of Gaul. And once a year, all the Druids would gather here in a grand assembly to decide disputes and hold religious celebrations. Well, eventually this grotto became incorporated into the foundations and crypt of the earliest cathedral on the site, lying beneath the chancel and the high altar. And the healing spring itself was incorporated in a man-made well known as the Puy de Saint Fort, the well of the strong saints. And there's a picture of it. The statue of the Virgin, which I haven't got a picture of this, but the statue of the Virgin, known as the Virgina Pariturae, which means a virgin about to give birth, was kept on an altar in the crypt. It was made of pear wood and depicted a female figure seated on a throne with her eyes closed and a male child standing in her lap. In 1650, the grotto was walled up, and a small chapel in the crypt was built adjacent to it, and the statue was transferred to it. Unfortunately, the original statue was burnt during the French Revolution, but in 1857, the underground shrine was restored, and a new statue carved of stone was placed in it. And the statue is also referred to as Notre Dame de Sous Terre, Our Lady from Under the Earth, and she is kept in the crypt that was once the Druidic grotto. I mean, even now you can go down there and you can imagine you're in the grotto. The cathedral, which of course now is a beautiful Gothic cathedral, is dedicated to the Assumption of the Virgin Mary, who is Bellissima, the beautiful lady. Now, separated from France by the English Channel, which is like the diaphragm in the human body, which is a manifestation of the etheric veil between the solar plexus and the heart, the focus of the heart chakra of the Grail Kingdom is marked by central London. The ancient Britons referred to London as Caer Troia Nova, the seat of New Troy, and it was protected by the goddess Guinevere or Ceridwen, in other words, Pallas Athena. And Caer Troia Nova was also dedicated to Lud, the Celtic father god of Lu, the light, from whom the Romans derived their name for the city Londinium, or Lud's town. And Lud is equivalent to Merlin, the teacher of Arthur, Arthur being Lu. The sacred centre of the ancient city is nowadays marked by St. Paul's Cathedral on the summit of Lud's Hill. The cathedral is constructed on the site of two Roman temples, one to Jupiter, Zeus, who's Greek Zeus, and the other to Diana, the moon goddess. And these in turn were built on the site of a Druidic sanctuary and circle, or so it's said, there was a stone circle there, dedicated to Ceridwen, whom the Romans here called Diana. Lying to the southwest of Lud's Hill and its lunar goddess sanctuary is Westminster, which is the complementary solar sanctuary. Westminster is built on what was originally an island, the Isle of Thorns, on which was Tot Hill, meaning the Hill of the Law. As a Celtic sanctuary, it was dedicated to the god Lu or Hu, the sun god or god of light. This light is the wisdom which is the divine law. Hence the name Tot Hill, the hill of the law. Lu and Ceridwen, later referred to as Arthur and Guinevere, are the god and goddess representing the wisdom and intelligence of the heart, respectively. Their classical equivalents are Apollo and Athena, or Britannia, a classical name for the Celtic goddess Ceridwen. And London is known as a dragon's city. There are different reasons for this, but one of them is because the River Thames flows alongside the two ancient sanctuaries of the city like a serpent or dragon. Now the throat chakra. The throat chakra of the Grail Land is focused on Great Whernside, the highest part of the Yorkshire Moors. That's Great Whernside up there, covered in snow. And running alongside the western slopes of this mountain is a valley called Wharfdale, through which runs the River Wharfe. And at the lower end of Wharfdale is Bolton Abbey. This is Wharfdale here. And at the end of it is Bolton Abbey, or the ruins of Bolton Abbey. It was originally called Bolton Priory, and later became an abbey, and was built in the 12th century by Augustinian canons on the banks of the river, immediately south of Great Whernside and in the central flow of the Grail Line, the spinal axis of the Grail Land. The Yorkshire Dales are home to many such beautiful priories and abbeys, built by the Augustinians and Cistercians who came here for peace and tranquility, to offer their prayers and to sing their Gregorian chants. Singing was their main concern in this wonderful throat chakra of the Grail Land. Now the brow chakra, the focus of the brow chakra of the European Grail Kingdom is marked by Edinburgh, situated on the southern shores of the Firth of Forth in Scotland. Here's a better map of it. Now Edinburgh is another dragon city, but this time the dragon is represented by the Pentland Hills, which ends in 7 separate hills representing the 7 heads of the mythological dragon. And the old city of Edinburgh sits on one of these hills, created from the remains of an ancient volcanic eruption. The name of the city is derived from the Celtic Aidin or Eden, meaning hill fort, but also signifying the hill as a sacred hill. So Eden or Eden sounds very similar to Eden, the Garden of Eden, so on. On the highest point of this hill is St. Margaret's Chapel, standing firmly on the solid basalt volcanic core and protected by the elaborate castle that has been gradually built around it. Margaret means pearl and refers to the pearl of great price, symbolic of the truth that is revealed through the face of the bride or soul who is at one in love with her Lord or Spirit of Truth. So it's very fitting that her chapel should be here. And then there's Arthur's Seat. Arthur's Seat is the remains of an even greater volcanic core and is the highest of the 7 hills. And the modern city of Edinburgh is sprawled over all 7 hills. And the main body of the dragon is formed by the Pentland Hills that stretch southwestwards from Edinburgh. And the spinal axis of the Grail Line, that's the axis of the Grail Land, passes through Castle Law Hill, which lies near the northeastern end of the Pentlands. I'm pointing to Castle Law now, and that's what I call the Grail Line, the axis of the Grail Land. The hill not only marks the heart of the Edinburgh Pentlands dragon, but also the centre of the Grail Land's brow chakra. This is where I went to Collington and then was shot up above Castle Law, where I was given the vision of the Grail Land. So it works. Good brow chakra, although I didn't know it in those days. So the adjoining trinity of hills, called Cape Law, Alamure and Cair Kelton, they form the actual northeast end of the Pentland Hills. So these are the 3 peaks here. And they overlook all 7 of Edinburgh's hills and far beyond, over the Firth of Forth to the distant hills of Fife. It's a really good lookout place. Now the crown chakra, up here, crown chakra of the Grail Land is focused on Ben More Assynt, and this is the highest mountain in the far north Assynt area of Scotland. The Assynt area, that's Ben More Assynt. The Assynt area, the whole area, is a mystical landscape of great mountains rising up from sea level, almost from sea level, and standing alone like solitary guardians, surrounded by wide open valleys and mirror-like lochs and sea inlets, reflecting the exquisite beauty and colours of the landscape and sky. It's just a beautiful area. Sarah and I just love it up there. The very furthest northerly point of the Grail Land is Cape Wrath, close to which on the west coast is Sandwood Bay. And here the land opens itself out to not just the ocean, but also to the greater cosmos, the greater universe. And here the mind can expand, really expand, and the spirit can soar out into the universe. At least that's been our experience. Now, this is not the end of the story, because as the Kundalini rises up the chakras of the Grail Land, it comes to what's called the sparking point. Illumination itself occurs when the Kundalini is risen right up to the brow chakra, and then in loving aspiration and offering of itself, jumps to the crown chakra. And this jumping is called arcing. You can do it in the physics lab with electricity. You know, have electricity jump from one pole to another pole, and it creates a spark. So that's called arcing. But arcing also has a further significance in wisdom tradition, such as the Ark of the Covenant and so on like that. So it is this sparking that produces illumination. And the sparking point is the center of the halo that appears around the head when in a state of illumination. In the Grail Land, the exact center of this sparking point can be found at Grantley on the River Tay, about 3 miles west of Pitlochry. So there it is on the large scale map, the small scale map, and here's a picture of the river. Because the river here at Grantley boasts some challenging and exciting whitewater rapids with whitewater rafting. In fact, the Olympic team practices here. It's wonderful to watch. Grantley is itself the heart centre of a landscape temple that stretches east-west across this part of Scotland, the spine of which the River Tay partly follows in its flow from west to east. And the head of this landscape temple is Schiehallion, Scotland's sacred mountain that marks the geographic centre of Scotland. Schiehalion's Gaelic name is Seed Kylan. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but Seed Kylan. I apologise to Scots people listening. But it means the fairy hill of the Caledonians. Some equate it with the mystical Mount Herodon. It is powerfully involved in the sparking and illumination of the Grail Land, which began, to my perception, in 2008. Moreover, I have no doubt at all that all our pilgrimage work along the chakras of the Grail Line help the sparking and illumination to occur. So, exactly when the golden child Zagreus, represented by the Grail Land, was born is hard to determine. But the moment this child was torn to pieces by the Titans can be determined. This was the moment when Brexit happened, at 11 p.m. GMT on 31st of January 2020. And a border was re-established in the English Channel, thereby cutting the upper part of Zagreus off from his lower part. But at the same time, both before Brexit as well as after, Zagreus's heart is in the process of being raised up to become the swan Dionysus. There's the swan. Now this applies not just to the great landscape temples of Europe, but also to all good hearts everywhere. For whilst the Titanic attacks continue, which is going on right now, the good hearts of all good-hearted people worldwide are being rescued and raised, resurrected to form their celestial souls, just as the mortal candle flame with its limited form transmutes itself into immortal light, an unlimited form that shines everywhere. Ultimately, according to the myth, Zeus will destroy the Titans with a thunderbolt, but we have yet to see how this will happen and what form it will take. So I'll stop there. We're still in the mystery.